Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 235 of Kouryer podcast. Our today's guest is Mr. Philippe Colin, also known as Kouryer Shoku. He's a freelance concept artist and illustrator based in Taiwan. And of course, without any mentioning, you obviously know at this point, in the for contact section of the captions, you can find the links to his personal website, Twitter account, and ArtStation account. So if you want to see more of his works in detail, you can check those out as well. And with that being out of the way, let's jump into the first signature question where I start off the podcast with, which is give us a little introduction on how you got into the world of visual arts and design. Basically, tell us your origin story of, how you became an artist, basically.
Well, it's not very original. Like every other kid, I started to draw at school and for fun, every day, I guess, and I never stopped. There is no specific moment where I choose to draw. It just was always there.
All right. And were you originally studying art and design? Like, let's say you were in high school, then you had to, of course, think of your future, and what you're going to study in the college or something, or if you should go to college or something, all those big questions, that you have to kind of find an answer for when you're at that age. So were you originally studying art and design, or you were pursuing another career path? Like, how was that whole area for you?
Yeah, well, so when I was a kid, I always wanted to become a designer when I for the future. And I, as soon as I could take an artistic direction into my scholarship, I did it. So in high school, we had an option for art. It was maybe 2 or 4 hours per week. It was relatively short, but I applied for that once I could. And so for the 4 years, 3 years at high school, I was doing that, and in the same time I was taking some lessons on the side for painting. And once I finished high school, I went in a private art school in Lyon for 4 years. So yeah, I had a good support from my family, and I just went all in that without much doubt, I would say.
All right, that's awesome. And actually, I was wondering, what were some of your favorite franchises, and just, both in, entertainment, of course, in entertainment, which means, video games, animation, films. What were some of your, favorite franchises that really inspired you as well?
So I have always been a geek, I would say, before we were coding, before we were using this name. And when I was a kid, I was a lot into Japanese anime and American comic books. Because in France, and I think in Spain too, we had some TV channels buying Japanese anime instead of European production because it was cheaper. So in the afternoon, we have some TV show for kids with a lot of Japanese anime that were like Dragon Ball Z or Captain Tsubasa, Saint Seiya, this kind of stuff. And some not even aimed at kids, because in France, the TV channels were considering every anime something for kids. So there is a generation at the end of the 80s and beginning of the 90s where we were subject to Japanese anime, to all kind of Japanese anime very young, and I think it had a lot of influence on a lot of French artists and other European artists. So this was like Dragon Ball Z, for example, it was very big in France at this moment. And then from 1990, 1990. And in addition of that, I was also a big fan of US comics, so typically X-Men and Uncanny X-Men, everything around X-Men, so Generation X, X-Factor, Spider-Man stuff, the crossovers, the Image comics, a lot of stuff, but it was more something, or it was not a big thing in France at this moment. It was more personal, I would say, because you could look at those comics and buy them in some cigarette shops in France, where you had also some magazine and some lottery tickets, stuff like that. And there are always some US comics like right there. And I never saw anyone else, any other kid right there. So it was not like the anime. It was very more niche, I would say. So I've always had those two main inspiration from Japan and from the US, and Dragon Ball Z and X-Men, I would say, was my favorite franchise at the time.
All right. And of course, in the introduction, I mentioned that you're like a freelance illustrator and concept artist. But I was wondering, like, you mentioned, how you kind of decided to become an artist, and how the things went by, for you. But how did you decide that, all right, illustration and concept artist for me? Like, how was that transition like? And also tell us about your experience of your whole life working as an illustrator and concept artist. Like, how has the journey been thus far?
I went after high school. I went in a private art school, and for 4 years. And during those 4 years, at the beginning of those 4 years, the scholarship is very traditional, so you have to replicate very realistic stuff. You have to learn anatomy, learn perspective, learn how to use acrylic paint, charcoal, etc. So you don't really ask yourself a lot of questions. It's very scholar. You have to do something and you have a grade after that. And with the late years in that school, you have to express a bit more your own style and try different options like anime, comics. They already had some 3D at the time, and press art or newspaper art, stuff like that. So I was not sure what to do. I wanted to draw, I wanted to do art, but I was not sure in what department yet exactly. I was very interested in animation at the time, and we were doing like frame by frame exercise, and I really liked that. And we started to learn Photoshop in the last year. I mean, very basically, but I really liked the possibility of it was the beginning. It was not the beginning of Photoshop, but beginning of Photoshop for individuals. It was like the CS version, and it was really big for me because I like colors, but I always find it too slow, and I was very interested in that. And I didn't think a lot at doing video games at that time, but I liked it obviously, but was more into comics and animation. And when we had to, it was the last year of the scholarship, you had to find an internship in a company in the area, in the same city, if you could. And I found an internship in a video game company. So it was really small company. It was a subsidiary of another average company in Lyon also. And I started to to work for them. It was like during the holidays, and I really liked it. It was like the early step of the development of a new ID. So it was like the most fun step on the development of the games. It was a sci-fi game, so it was like a dream job already happening as an Itachi, and I really like it. And in the same time, I was doing some. You had to do also like a project for the last year to have your diploma. And for the project, I had the opportunity to do a comic book that I was going to publish after the diploma, after I finished it. So I really did a video game and comic books in the same time that particular year, and I never really chose between both. I do less comics right now because it's a bit harder to live doing only comics, but still something I really like. But in the job I found most frequently, it's more about concept art and illustration for video game, or for some time some cards or some board games. But yeah.
All right, and the next thing I need to mention is that now, speaking of your experience, I want to ask you this: how does your design process usually go anytime you want to start working on a new project? Both your basically, how does the structure of your pipeline look like? I want to know for both personal stuff and also professional stuff.
So you mean for illustration and concept art?
Yep.
Okay. So it always starts with paper and a pencil for me, because I always like the feeling of drawing like that. And at the beginning I wanted something clean with the pencil that I just colored after that, and the line art was there in the final result. But nowadays it's more sketchy on paper, and I scan it to start work on the color on PC, and I do some correction usually and some test in Photoshop before that. And once the sketch is good for me, I start the colors. And for the colors, it's a technique it's always the same structure in Photoshop, the same group of layers. I have some scripts, so once I'm good with the sketch, I just click some button, and everything is laid out and organized, and I start to do the basic color. So the colors which is attached to materials, then the shading, then the reflective lights, and do some tweaking at the end. And usually I have some filters at the end, and that's it. And it's more for illustration. If it's concept art, usually I can do just simple colors to make the ID pop out, or just keep it like in sketches.
Right. And who are some of your favorite artists and designers that have inspired you the most?
So they would be Japanese and American for the most part. So like I said, I was a big fan of US comic books when I was young. And the biggest influence would be Joe Madureira, like a lot of other artists. And the whole kind of new wave that that you could see in the comics at that time, like Humberto Ramos, Carlos Pacheco, Chris Bacalo, Jeff Matsuda. That was like Greg Capullo is a bit more traditional, but there are whole generation of comic artists that were kind of doing something new at that time. It was something a bit hybrid between traditional US artists and not necessarily manga influence, but they were doing something more stylized, more simple, and more organic, I would say, that I really liked. And in the same time, on the Japanese side, there was obviously Akira Toriyama, since I was pretty young, and it's a bit later. I was a huge fan of Evangelion. So Yoshiyuki Sadamoto, Ikuto Yamashita for the mecha design was a huge fan of that. In video games, I'm a big fan of Metal Gear Solid, the game, and the main artist Yoji Shinkawa, because I like his art, obviously, but really like the place he's taking in the development of the game. He does like everything. Can do characters, background, mecha design, and from a very deep level into the development, also feeding concept art for the 3D artist, and also his art is also brought into the communication aspect of the game, so the marketing side, the cover, everything around the game. So it was a huge model for me, and that's why for my first internship for this sci-fi project, I was really hyped to do that, because it was almost they asked me almost the same work that Yoji Shinkawa was doing at this time. So obviously I was very young and very bad, but it was still technically the same job. So I still try to be inspired by what he's doing still now.
All right. And what are you working on right now that you can tell us about? I mean, of course, if it's something that there's high probability there's NDAs involved. But if that's not the case, but what kind of information can you share with us of the stuff you're working on right now?
So right now I'm working on a video game. So it's going to be released in October. I'm working with Amplitude Studio, which is a French studio, and I was involved in the later steps of the game, so it's not really concept art, it's illustration for the cutscenes and some videos around the project. And that's the main project that's going to be released soon. I worked for almost 2 years with them, so it's when you're freelance, it's already a big task. Usually it's shorter, and I have some other small tasks, but I'm not sure I can speak about them.
All right. And what area, beside the area you're working on right now, which is of course in the area of art and design, would you be interested to explore and learn in the future? Basically what other completely non-related stuff are going on in your life? Maybe there's an activity, a goal, just anything.
So I like 3D also. I started to learn 3D
But that's not non-art related. That's completely art related as well.
Okay, so artistic.
Yeah.
Nothing. I mean, I'm doing a bit of sport, but I mean, I'm playing video games. I guess it's artistic. I'm watching some series, some movies. I'm doing some model kits also when I have time. Japanese model kits. I'm trying to paint them and this stuff, but it's totally artistic also. Small robots.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
kind of like a hard question because a lot of artists answer, "Oh, I want to learn guitar or music." They usually say music a lot of times,
yeah,
but that's
but
kind of
it's
arts
still
related. So,
artistic. Yeah, yeah,
but I think I should specify like non-visual arts related. I think that's like a good way to pr- say that. But yeah, I think honestly, like the reason I ask it because I'm kind of curious because the whole thing is I really believe everyone should have like multiple interests to grow in. Like not just for artists, just in general. If you're an athlete, you should have like another outlet to grow as well. I think it really helps the brain grow better and just helps you like become more healthier mentally. I think just to have multiple things,
no, I'm just
and I'm always curious what other
big.
people have in their life.
Yeah, no, I don't see anything. I mean, I I go out on the weekend with my family, but yeah, it's not really the same.
Yeah, I mean, if it makes you happy, I mean, it's fine. Like honestly, like not
Yeah.
everything has to be the same template.
Hmm.
And yeah, awesome. And well, then actually, one thing I want to ask is like during your whole experience, like that you worked in the industry, if you could say one your most important tip and advice that you've learned from all your experiences, what would that be?
Um, in my career, the better advice, the best advice. I don't know. It's not an advice. It's maybe an observation I did some time ago for myself. I I consider that opportunities are like equal equals to talent multiplied by relations. So if you have one of the two at zero, usually it's very hard to find a good opportunity in your work. But if you have a lot of talent, lot of relations, you can go anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, basically that's the whole thing in every industry, like connections.
Yeah, it's not related to artistic. Yeah,
No, but still, like, no, wait, but that still is actually really important as well, because if in order to get connections, you need to actually communicate with people. And communication is one of the soft skills that a lot of artists, since the majority, I think, of the people in this industry are introverts, kind of do have, it's a bit of a challenging for them to make connections. Like, I have friends who are like really good artists, and I say, like, that hey, you can just easily message them on Instagram or email them if you have questions or ask for feedback on your portfolio all the time, make connections like that. And if usually seniors, like people who are like really good, that's something when they see a junior who's trying their best and are passionate, they would love to help that person grow, you know so I highly recommend people to just try to connect, and of course be thoughtful. When you ask questions or stuff like that, you shouldn't like demand the answer. You should just try to make a friend who happens to be good at something that you want to be good at as well. I know that sounded like a random thing I said, but it's a really
no, it's
important
right.
note, to be
Yeah,
honest.
it's right that personally, and from what you said, I think is the case for a lot of artists. I focused more on my work than on my relations. So I mean, it's like a bit of a gamble, and it's related to personalities, I guess. So you can work a bit on that, but there's still a limit to what you can do from what you are.
Yeah. And well, we've reached the final question and section of the podcast, which is called time capsule. All right, so let me tell you the scenario, what it actually means. Imagine you're about to be ejected with a escape pod in a spaceship, all right? And you're locked in that escape pod. You can't get out. and there's a countdown timer on the door above the door that is just going down, and when it reaches zero, you're going to be ejected in the space. You're never going to be heard from again. You're never going to be seen by anyone. But there's like this console in your escape pod that you can leave some voice recordings that will be left on the space station or the spaceship or whatever. So in your last few moments that you have the opportunity to say anything that you want to, what would you say from yourself, a human being, to another human being? And that another human being is anyone who's going to listen to that. Like, basically your most important lessons you've learned in this life as a human that you could leave as your legacy, in that recording. What would that be?
Okay, so I'm not talking to the other astronaut in the ship.
No, they're not. I mean, when you're recording, if there's someone else or there's not, it doesn't matter, So.
Okay. So I'm escaping from a ship that is going well, and I'm going to die alone.
Yeah, there was some malfunction, and you're getting ejected. Yeah, that sucks. I know.
I don't know. I mean, I could try to give some advice in other artists, but if it's anybody, I guess I won't say anything because I never was really somebody listening to advice. I always prefer doing the mistake and mess up and try to see how I messed up and doing differently the time after that. And also, I don't think that people really listen anyway, especially now. In this, with the social networks, everybody is kind of listening to what they want to listen, not necessarily hear something different and not change their behavior based on advice. So, yeah, I would just let the pure silence.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's something we can extract from what you said. So, if you could say one sentence, I think it should be along this kind of line of thing, like just I don't know, like keep an open mind and always try to be self-aware of your own actions and thoughts.
I guess if you synthesize, it would be like listen to yourself, but it's just kind of what I did. It's not necessarily good advice for some people. I know some people need to have some advice to go further. So yeah.
So in the end, we're left with
not that. So yeah, I mean, I think it's too broad to give advice for anybody on anything. So.
No, I mean, yeah, sure, you're right, actually. But usually, when one of the reasons, like this is something I think a lot of guests or, obvious, regular listeners of the podcast know, I usually avoid giving the questions beforehand to the guests because I want to put them on the spot, basically. And this is one of those questions as well, Because, yeah, sure, a lot of people try to not really answer this question or they find it hard because it's like, they think any answer they're going to say is going to be cliche, so they don't say it. Or like, sometimes, they have the same problem as you are, because you're like, this is too broad, what should I say, Like someone once said, don't put pineapple on pizza as answer, And
yeah, just a bad advice. I mean, I cannot like it,
Wait, see, we found your nemesis then, someone says, don't put pineapple on.
Give me his name.
I actually forgot, who it was.
I'm just kidding.
I know, but you get the point. Of course, I would jokingly say the name, but I actually don't remember. But I guess I'll write something, just in the lines of try to enjoy your life, be open-minded about yourself. Because the thing is, I usually write the answer to this question as a third post on the Instagram, so I have to write something. That's
okay. Yes. So yeah. mm, listen to your inner voice. So you're sure to have something very cliche this time.
Listen to your inner voice. That's actually good. Short, simple, straight to the point. Yeah, I'll go with that. Thank you so much. And again, thanks so much for coming by for this episode and podcast. Where can people contact you if they had any questions? Their Twitter account and email, okay?
Maybe my email, yeah.
All right. So yeah, you can find the email that in his ArtStation profile. So I'm not gonna.
Yeah, ArtStation and Twitter on my website because I still have one website.
Yep, and I'll put the links to website, Twitter, and ArtStation down below, captions down below. So if anyone wants to check it out, you can check it out there. And that's, again, thanks so much for coming by. And thank you to anyone who tuned in and listened to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, if there's any comments or suggestions, leave them down in the comment section down below, or you can send it to me. And well, with that out of the way, take care, everyone, and stay safe till the next episode. Bye.
Bye-bye.